How's it going? So my last video ended up having some graphical issues and mic problems, so I'm doing this all over again. Um, so my last video was on Kiwayah creation, so I'm just going to expand on that, as well as some questions I received. This tool, Empyrion Playfield Desginer, I'm going to link it in the comments. It is a great tool that will make life very easy when creating your own custom scenarios, which is what we're going to start on. So my desktop is a mess. I'm working on Transcendence's A10 test server, and I got a lot going on, so try to ignore the messy desktop. But I have Empyrion already in my quick links, and I'm going to show you how I have Transcendence set up. I also have a dedicated server tool, but the server runs on a remote machine, so I'm only messing with the single player install. If you go to Contents, go to Scenarios, when you look at default Kiwayah Omicron, this is how it's set up. So you need to mimic this. You can just copy and paste it, and then name it what you want. This is Transcendence's. This is near finished product, so this is what yours will look like. The extras and content folder here is not required. This is for the PDA, which we do have a custom PDA. And we have some custom configuration files, so you don't need to worry about that yet. But these are the important ones. Playfields all the way down to game options. Preview, just for working in single player. This is just copied off the Kiwayah Omicron. The description is just the most basic, just says server name. And it's not important on the server. The game options is important. The example file for that is located in the default Kiwayah Omicron scenario, and that will explain what each and every line on that does. Sectors, this is for your placement of your planets. There are some tutorials on that already, and Empyrion Playfield Generator, which is offered by the same people who run HWS. And that is also found in the official forums. Ours actually is using that program. Going to go back to the Transcendence prefabs. This folder, you want to get rid of everything that's already there. If you copied from the Kiwayah Omicron, this is only for your custom prefabs. So those POIs you created. You do not want to put any default POIs in here. You do not want to put your custom POIs in the straight up contents folder prefabs. You want them to be in your scenario. We have quite a library, and this has even been filtered a bit. Playfields. This right here is currently all of our custom playfields. And the only thing that needs to go in here is the custom playfields. These do not use a static or dynamic. You can put those in here, but for simplicity's sake, we are just going to be dealing with playfield.yamls, and these are the only two files you need in these folders. You don't need picture files, you don't need anything else, you don't need debug, none of that, just these two. And if you're first starting out, there's two ways that you can go ahead and just get a straight up playfield.yaml started. You can either A, create one from scratch with Empyrion Playfield Desginer, or B, you can use the solar system generator, which is right here, solar system generator, and you can create planets from the default, and it will save that as a playfield.yaml, and it will save it in its corresponding folder. I don't have any made, but it will put it right here, and then you can just go into your scenario, create a new folder in playfields, name it what you wish, and put the playfield.yaml and terrain ECF right into that folder. And you can open up it with EPD. But I already have a bunch here. Most of these were created from scratch in actually Notepad++ and then ported over into EPD. But I'll go ahead and open Empyrion Playfield Desginer. And I'm actually going to show you guys a planet that was made from scratch in EPD, and it's called Kiwayah. It was a planet that I made in Alpha 3 or 4, and of course that was way too old to do anything with, so I had to just completely recreate the planet. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. And just really quick, before I get any farther, with EPD, you are going to want to get to your initial setup, go into Tools, Options, and make sure that this right here, Empyrion Game or Dedicated Server Path, is set for the single player game, right here, Empyrion Galactic Survival. And I'm just going to show you where that's located. That is actually located in here. I'm going to go back a bit. So if you just have it installed on C, your program files x86, Steam, and it's going to be in Steam Apps, Common, Empyrion Galactic Survival. So I already have mine set, and that's all for that. Next thing we want to do is re-import all prefabs, because now you should see your scenario that you created come up in the content window right here. And EPD, unless you re-import, is not going to show all of your custom POIs. So now we'll show you how to get them over from your blueprints folder into your scenario. So we're going to go into Saves, Blueprints, and I have two Steam IDs here, so I'm going to go to my Steam ID that I made it on, and I'm going to find the blueprint. So like this is a recent one I created for the server. You only need this EPB file, and you're just going to want to copy it, go back to Empyrion, Content, Scenarios, into your scenario and prefabs, and then you're just going to want to go ahead and paste that. No, it's good I did that because it wasn't in here. Alright, and that's all there is for that. Now, I can go ahead and re-import all prefabs. Depending on how many you have, will depend on how long this takes. Because it's loading in all the ones in the content prefabs folder as well as all of the scenario folders. So for a server like Transcendence, where we have right now 312 extra prefabs that we're adding to the game, it's going to take a little bit longer. And this is also on a NVMe drive, so if you're on a spinning hard disk, this could take even longer than what you see right now. Alright, so it's done doing that. I got Kiwayah open. So I've already gone through and done all of my basic settings that you normally find in the dynamic playfield.yaml. For an explanation of all of this, EPD does have, and you hover over with your mouse, descriptions of that and the values that it will accept. If you want a very detailed explanation of each of these lines, you can go into Contents, Playfields, and Elion has created example planets. Dynamic and static. Dynamic, this is all your biomes, those initial settings, like water level. If I open that up, in these comments, comments are not read by the game, so you can even put your own notes here. But they have explanations on all of this stuff, on almost every single line. And same thing with the static. Static is your resources, your creatures, your creature spawning, your drone base setup, planet vessel setup, all of that stuff. And once again, they have a description on all of this. And that program I'm using right here to open these up, it's Notepad++. It is completely free. You can also use Visual Studio. For some of our stuff for the server, I do use Visual Studio. but I do not recommend using a regular text editor like the default one in Windows. Alright, so I got one thing, a seed. So having a standard seed, I've been using this one since alpha, maybe alpha 3 or 4 or 2. When I load my scenario up in single player, there should be very little difference whenever it's loaded up in the server. I should be able to predict in single player exactly how that planet will look, know exactly where the POIs are going to spawn, all that good stuff. So I recommend using a consistent seed for each of your planets. It doesn't have to be the same seed on every planet, but just use a number that you like. I really, for some reason, just like this number. It was the first seed I ever used when I played a single player game in Empyrion. That was a long time ago. All right, planet class 2, 3, 4, 5. Planet axis. Once again, read some of these through these descriptions. You can do something like -25. This just has to do with the tilt. Playfield difficulty. I've seen people put in like 20 here. Don't do that. Just 1 through 10. You can modify this with your POIs and your biomes. So certain biomes will have a plus like level mod. Same thing with the POIs. So you can have certain places be harder or be easier. So I choose just a standard number for my planet. So this planet is 3, because it is just a nice kind of half desert temperate planet, but it does have some harder areas in it and some very difficult POIs. And temperature range on this planet was pretty important. Same thing with humidity, because all of its biomes are very dependent upon humidity and temperature. And because of that, I've also added a humidity mask and temperature mask. And it does have a crown shape, not as important. You can find all of these in the contents, and I believe it is in stamps. This is one great one to look at. Right here, these global mask data, ground data, you can use these as references along with the pictures to see what these are exactly doing. This is a little library of all the stamps in the game, how big they are, and also this is important too, right here. These little numbers, so I'm looking at Rift Lava 2, it works with class size 2, 3, 4, and 5 planets, but that is not the case for every single stamp. Some of these stamps right here, so Volcano 2, you notice a class size 2 planet's not listed, so you don't want to do that. Some of them, like right here, these mountains, these are for class size 4 and 5 worlds. Alright, so we'll go ahead and move on. Oh, this is a fun one. Gravity and atmosphere density. I do want to go a little bit more into this. So gravity is interesting. The larger the number, the higher the gravity. With volume and weight as a mechanic in the game, anything over this amount, this negative probably 11 to 12, players are going to have a really hard time. It almost feels like without volume and weight, maybe even the -20, just 2 Gs, 2 times Earth, around that level. Atmosphere density. So the weapons are affected by this, and so are solar panels. A little bit. There's other things I actually have to do with that too. I'll explain. So for planets that maybe don't have a breathable atmosphere, that you want weapons that have a farther reach on, I can change this to say about 0.6. And that would be a pretty good number. For a planet that has a thicker atmosphere, like this one, it ends up having a very orangish yellow thick sky. Right now I have it set for 1.15. I think I originally had it 1.3, and that was pretty bright, pretty thick, but usually about the highest I go on this one is about 1.6 for a planet that has a really thick atmosphere. Alright, so we'll go on a little bit. leave this blank for right now. Planet type, this is a Baron. I recommend just using the defaults, but really, you notice no effect in playfield creation. But who knows what they have in store in the future for this line right here. Alright, difficulty, and that is not with the level. This is just going to say if it's easy, medium, hard, ultra, in-game. So for 3, this planet is listed as medium. Land claim zones, and this is default, device off. So with the device, the players, like if they are going to be tearing down a crash ship or something, they can just lay down one of those and they'll be able to do all that good stuff. There's a lot more information about that you can read up on in the forums. Local special effects. Pollen, for example, right here. These you can mainly do with each biome. And they're more cosmetic than anything. You can choose the time. Most of these are just cosmetic. On this planet, I didn't go into detail on the biomes yet. But I probably will, like especially for the wind lines, because I don't really want those showing up in the mountains. I want to be more in the flat plains area. Weather and global effects. Alright, clear. This is an important one. So, clear, I have an initial delay and a delay of 0. And its lifetime, you can read up a little bit. But this is a pretty default amount of time. I believe it's in game seconds. I could be wrong on that, but even if you're not really wanting the plan to be clear very often, you might just want this to go down to 60. But it's a good one to have. And then you can go on to do the rest of your weather. Like I have acid rain, just on a high delay and with a very short lifetime, but still enough just to surprise a player. And I build up with my delays. So for wind, delay 6, and I just build them up. So I have my more rare weather going down. And these effects, I love lightning, so you can put in the same effect over and over and over if you want, to make it a lot more apparent on the planet. So I did that with the lightning here. And Kiwayah has intense lightning because I have 3 settings right here, and I have them at different spawn heights as well. And you can choose the biomes here as well. Alright. Yeah, this is an interesting one too, atmosphere parameters. I recommend playing around with this and just kind of reading through that, because this will really change how you see your sky, your colors. So that way you're not just, before it seemed like you'd have to keep changing the colors and a lot of these settings really get what you wanted, but with the atmosphere parameters you can just make slight changes in here and see big differences. Alright, and once again, a lot of this, I'm just going to refer you straight to the playfield examples where they have the explanations of each of those. But for this planet, Kiwayah does not have a lot of fog. It doesn't have a lot of clouds either. And but the skies are very, it's like a deep orangish yellowish because it is kind of a temperate planet a little bit, but I wanted it to seem like more of a like healthier Mars, I guess. Alright, and going on, the build number, if you're converting in an Alpha 9 or before planet, I do recommend changing that to the latest. This is one of the experimental build numbers, so not a big deal, but it's a good thing to put on there. And then, let's see, radiation. This is where you set just the general radiation of the planet. Once again, you can actually tack on radiation to certain biomes. We'll go over that. Right here, if you don't want, say, bases to be allowed on the planet, or you don't want players being able to spawn in blueprints, you can just uncheck these, and that will give that result. And something right here is PvP. Alright, using fixed, I do not use fixed anything at all. For certain case scenarios, you might want to, especially if you're building a single player scenario or you're doing a creative mode world. All right, instance data. So this instances are a different type of playfield. Players enter via portal, and whenever they're done with that instance, with the time here, that playfield is wiped. For your normal planets and orbits, you're not messing with this at all. That could be an entirely different video within itself. All right, we're going to move on to resources. And right now I have just 4 resources. I have iron, copper, silicon, and taxid. And I also have them matching over here in the asteroid resources. All of these right now I have just set for threshold. Explain that. But whenever you add one, so I added iron, and I have it scaling. So if I want to use this YAML for a different world, I can do that. And when I change the class size, so if I change this down to a 2, that is the count minimum and maximum. When I change it up to a 4, it's going to actually be higher than that. And it'll tell you when you mouse over the minimum and maximum. 255 is a massive deposit. Massive number of deposits, I should say. Same thing down here. And this is actually the amount of ores. That is not the individual amount of ores. So for right now, I have this to where the players can come across a tiny deposit, or they can come across a large deposit. If I raise this up to about 25 or 30, that'd be a very large. All right, depth min max, literally, how deep is it in the ground? You can put negative numbers in here. I have them as positive, which means they're underground. Drone probability 0 to 1. If there's going to be drones, how many drones? This is the important one right here, this type default. When I change this to worm or cylinder, that is the rock type resources that you see. So in Alpha 9 and before, in the trainee CF file, we had something called childs. And resources need to take up a child. But when you ran out, you would need to use that resource as a cylinder type or a worm type. If I change this to a cylinder, I'd have to put the radius that those actually spawn in, the rocks. So say 10, and the vertical distance, yeah, at least some pretty standard, so 15. Now, with default, it means that that resource is a child in the trainee CF file, and it will just be a normal regular deposit that is voxel based. And if I go into Kiwayah's trainee CF file, so I'll go and pull that up. Now in Alpha 10 we have a total of 19 childs. So I have some extra ones in here too. I'm using kind of a standard template for most of my planets. Right there's iron. So which means I can use that as a regular default voxel deposit. And those can actually be changed in the PD as well. If you notice, you can actually set up textures. Oh, yeah, we'll go back to that in a moment. All right, for this one. So these resources all get threshold, meaning once the planet reaches 60% of that resource, that it's going to start trying to replenish. So in this case, 90% of what was originally there in the form of meteors. Now, if I want this to actually just always be spawning meteors, and it does not care if the deposits are mined or not, I'm going to set it for always. I'm going to actually tell it how many ores I want to be in that meteorite. I'm going to set up the delay. So I'm not really going to worry about that, but I'll set it for 1. Alright, subsequent delays. So for this multiplayer server, I'm going to say 12. And I'm also going to have them despawn in 12 too. And that's in game hours right here. So that's how you would do that. All right. And once again, we're not messing with this. And we're just doing random. I'm going to go over to the biomes. And this biome cluster data right here. This is where you're going to start entering all of your biomes. All right, the first one I'm going to start with is pull. And pull will always have a criteria of this right here. You can actually use this for criteria on other biomes. So 0 is the equator of the planet. So if you wanted to actually have up to a certain latitude for a biome to only exist in that area, you can actually add that as a criteria. There's also plus long. You don't do this on a pull, but plus long works on biomes too. All right, for the pull, you also want to have, oh wow, I don't have this actually set up, pull fog and underground layers. Right now I have my pull set up as for the default underground layer setup. These will all end up being the default underground textures. They're going to pop up in every biome unless I specify otherwise. And this -1 means it's kind of dynamic. So as they start digging, that is going to be a changing amount between these two depending on where it's at on the planet. Right here, this setup, so the first number is the ID, so that's the child number in the trainee CF file. And the thickness, this thickness is the default thickness, I think from Kiwayah. And it hasn't failed me yet, so I continuously use that on all of my planets. All right, textures. So I only have 2 textures, a top and a side. And the slope occurrence, so whenever you have like a hill or a cliff, that's the chance of this one, this texture ID, to be visible. And that's the main one I'm using for my pull. This you do have to set up for every biome. You can also use a second set. I'm doing that for my mountain biomes. And I haven't messed with this too much. I haven't had a lot of success with it. But you can see examples of that in the Kiwayah Playfield.yaml. Ambient sounds. There's actually more to this in the game. It's actually listed in the Playfield example as well. And I'll go into a little bit more about this on my next biome. But the next ones I have, I do water. I do more than one for water. So I have deep water with height less than sea level -5. Right there. So that way I know that all of these decorations down here, my seaweed isn't going to be popping out of the water. Same thing with my coral, my rocks. That actually needs to be real walk 5 of water. I have my ambient sound as water here. There's no level modifier. I have my grass setup. This is actually a very dense and tall setup for grass. I don't recommend putting the numbers that high. I'm on the surface of the planet. It will not get the results I think you expect. Just as the game progresses, maybe so. The next water biome is kind of that in between where some of the plants might be sticking out of the water. And I have a few things here for this planet. Some rocks and pillars and skeletons. And I have it set all the way to go to the heights less than sea level -1. Same thing here. This is from the previous biome. So I have that heights greater than sea level -5. And you can see that that one was heights less than sea level -5. And that is very important. When I go to my shallow water, you'll see it's greater than sea level -1, and that the height's less than a few meters above the planet's actually total sea level height, which is 32. So we go back to my shallow water. See 34, so I only went 2 above. So that way all my little plants and skeletons and stuff will actually show up and be more like a shoreline. On this texture I have sand here, and you can choose that via your Terrain ECF file. And they do have this texture editor. We'll go on more into that in a minute. Here, once again, I do have some pretty dense grass, but it's not as tall. We'll go ahead and move on. This is my main biome of the planet. This is where I start setting my humidity and height variables. Height's not really required from here on out, because now the water biomes have taken up everything that's below water. But for this one, this is where I have a lot of my decorations going on to make the planet kind of tropical looking near the water. That's why the humidity, you might want to play around with this for this planet. Humidity being greater than 0.3 gave me that effect. And the rest of the biomes ended up being pretty much deserts. And you can set up multiple plants here. I have patches. And this planet does actually have a lot of grass, even though it's all set pretty low. But I wanted it to make sure that the players, when they're coming into the planet, I assume that everyone's running a potato, that they'll be able to actually see grass and be able to easily load it. If you notice, there's no underground layers here, because it's using the default underground layers from my pool. But right here, I do have a different topsoil, because this is a tropical biome, so I believe I have grass set up here. Alright. Oh, right here. I do have a increased temperature. So it will always be 2 Celsius more than what the planet would normally, when it's generated, would have given. So if the temperature on the equator, where this biome is located, say, is 25 Celsius, when a player goes into this biome, instead of being 25, it's going to be 27. The radiation works that way too. So even though the planet radiation is 0, I can put this as 2, and the radiation would be 2. But the planet's radiation was 1, and I set this as 2, then it would be 3. Alright, and the Oasis biome is very similar, but now I'm doing stamps. And EPD has already done a lot of good stuff for you. I wouldn't worry about the splat map ones. Use everything but splat map for simplicity's sake. But you can get into that a lot more, and it does have explanations about this. But for these, I would refer to that file that I showed you earlier with these stamps, that little database, and it will give you a lot of good information about how big these are. This biome is really not very big. The temperature has to be greater than 20, and the humidity has to be greater than 0.75. This biome does not appear a lot on the planet and is pretty small. So these stamps I'm using right here are all fairly small stamps. And down here in my decorations, I have this set up, spawn near this decoration type. And that is pretty self-explanatory. Free means it doesn't care. But if you are going to start specifying that, I recommend specifying them for all of them, and the ones that just don't matter about whether they spawn near a plant or a tree, just put free. If you notice, there's not rock, so you gotta get creative on that. Stamp tries. Yeah, there's no description here. But this is how many times that in this biome during planet generation is going to try to place these stamps. And you'll want to set a probability. And I don't really mess with this much anymore with the overlaps, but you will see where I've done that in the mountains. Alright, so we'll move on. Desert Solitude is a very similar biome, just it's not an oasis, but it's set up the same way with cactuses and all that good stuff. It's got a bigger stamp because this is a very common biome on the planet, so I was able to use some bigger stamps for that. And it's going to get a half and half mixture of these two stamps. It's going to try 60 times. It's going to be a little hotter than most of the planet. And that's really about it here. If you notice, I have my humidity is less than 0.6. My temperature is pretty high. Pretty hot biome. Alright, with the mountains. This is where I have used the stamps force biome. So when these are placed, they will overlap themselves, and this biome will be generated on these stamps. And it is determined also by this criteria. And I did make the stamp trays a little bit higher on this because of that. But I don't recommend using this a whole bunch at all. Alright. Going into mountains, same deal here as the desert low mountains. It's using some pretty big mountains actually. And I have even higher stamp trays for this. Since mountains, I have the temperature going pretty cold. And I also have the probability up a little higher too. And up here's an example of my modifier. So when the general creatures spawn on the planet, in this biome, they're actually going to be a +2 more. So they're actually going to be level 5 instead of level 3. I'm also using the second set of textures on my mountains. I've just had more success cosmetically using this. And definitely kind of read through this. They are optional. But you can set up your textures. The occurrence of top texture 1, occurrence of top texture 2. You just gotta mess with it and try to get the best, I guess, cosmetic appeal out of that as you can. Sometimes just don't worry about it. But for this planet, the mountains were kind of plain Jane, so I sat here and messed with this a lot. Alright, this is probably the second most important biome next to pull and water. Okay, so third most important. Its selection criteria is true. Sometimes I use these as a debug more than anything, but this biome, whenever there is a part of the planet when it's generated that no other biome's criteria matches, this biome will actually be put in those locations. I also have it very last on the list as well. And if you're trying to make sure that this does not happen and use it as a debug biome, then I recommend using a texture maybe that's like bright red or something, to where you can see that from a distance that, oh great, there's, you know, my debug biomes happening over there. I need to work on my other biomes a bit more. Or you can just put some crazy decorations. On this planet I did have little spots where it was occurring, so I just made it pretty simple. And it matches with the rest of the planet. And for the most part, I was able to use this earlier with, I think I had it set up with pillars to be able to try to get rid of it as much as possible. And when you're working with that, going back to that seed, having that standard seed every time will help you out a lot. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get out of the biomes. For what we're doing today, we're not going to mess with this. Right now its default setting is perfectly fine. Alright, POIs. That's probably where I'm going to spend the most focus on. So Kiwayah here is using quite a few custom ones and quite a few defaults. And its drone base is a custom drone base. It's Polaris. And now that we've re-imported all of our prefabs, all of our custom prefabs in our scenario are going to pop up in this list. So right here is my Polaris Sky T3 I created. And I used Raven FF's asteroid guide, so the blueprints he provided to make a platform for the POI to sit on. And this is a floating drone base in the sky. It's part of our in-game content and a special mission. And it is a mission POI, and it spawns a lot of critters, so I actually have its modifier set to -1, so all of its NPCs are at level difficulty of 2. But its faction says Polaris, so the drones it will spawn as well will be Polaris. In the drone base setup, this is important. The default one that you can use is drone base setup. Super easy. I do recommend that in the beginning. The first creating planets. Same thing with planet vessel base. That you just use that and don't mess with the custom naming. It just makes things simpler as you're working with a lot of different custom planets. And we're going to go down a little bit more. Biome occurrence, meaning this POI will only occur in a certain biome. This one didn't really matter because it's placing on water, so I know it's going to spawn in my water biomes. And excluded biomes, if you don't want it, say, popping up in a mountain, once again, I'm doing it this way, so I don't got to worry about it. Now the playset, though, it gives you the option of on water, terrain, underwater. You can also type in Notepad++, on water, comma, space, terrain, and that way your floating POIs will spawn either on water or terrain. They haven't added that, or JMCBurn hasn't added that on EPD yet as an option. But if you're using this, you need to have in your POI properties this setting, SI, and set to off. Meaning that also the POI with its floating one's not just going to collapse out of the sky as soon as it gets shot. You can also use this for POIs that you know, even though you don't want them floating, you can have them spawn on terrain. But you know that they're, say, a tower, and that you don't want the player just hitting the bottom block and taking out the whole POI. You can also turn the SI off on those too. And right here, POI type default. This is just a regular POI. It's drone base. So I have that set as default, but if you're working with a creative mode playfield that you're working on, or an instance, or you just want to have some random blueprints that available to players like SVs, HVs, that is what you will need to specify. So as a special case scenario there is important. That means that the game is going to take an extra try to get this POI placed. For a drone base, for an admin station, those are super important. If you have POIs linked to a mission in your PDA, you want to mark is important. Outside of those scenarios, I don't worry about it. Especially for POIs that you're trying to spawn a lot of on a planet, don't worry about is important. You're going to end up getting the opposite result that you expect. And we're going to go down over here to the drone probability. So all my drones on this planet are Polaris. So this is a Polaris POI. I want it to have Polaris drones. And right here, I got all that set up, initially powered. This sometimes doesn't matter, but troop transport, by the way, just means that once a player tags it, troop transport's going to pop out. It's the drone base. I haven't had luck with the troop transport actually spawning from the drone base itself and deploying troops at the drone base. But the initially powered, you want to uncheck this for, say you have a crashed ship, wreckage, that kind of stuff. There's no reason for it to be on. Then you can keep the initially powered checked off. And we'll worry about this with a different playfield. But this is if you have that player spawner. You can check mark that it's a player start POI. And spawning near and don't spawn near, I'm going to show you the next POI where I have that set up. This area right here, there are some changes happening with that as of the most recent build of Alpha 10 Experimental 10.3. We're removing all of our resources spawning near POIs from the playfields. So I don't have a lot of information on that right now. I haven't tried to test it very much yet to see what's going on there, but so far from what I've noticed, it does not behave like it did in Alpha 9 or the initial release of Alpha 10 Experimental. I'm going into the POI properties. I already explained SI off. Regeneration, that is in minutes. So the by default regeneration set for 720 on a multiplayer server. That is really long. So as I do my regeneration, I think about when a player goes to the POI, how long do you expect that player to actually be able to go through the POI, multi-tool some of it down. You don't want to get them timed to multi-tool the whole thing down. Basically complete the fight, get what they want, and get out. So this is a decent sized POI. An hour and 15 minutes, I think, is plenty of time for them to be able to do what they need and get out, and for another group of players to be able to come in and have the same experience. For most of my POIs, I actually just do a max time of 60 minutes. And then music, self-explanatory, personal container. This is an important one. So if you have that personal container item that I explained in the last video, set in your POI, this is a required parameter. And here I have these items added to it. So I've added a sniper rifle, some bullets, heavy armor, and raw diamonds for a diamond mission. And to add these, you just hit add. You just type in. So if you want to put in some weapons, type epic, and right here's all of the epic weapons. And you just put in the amount. And that is literally it for the personal container. One thing to note is when these regenerate, if a player has already looted that personal container, despite the fact the POI has regenerated, that personal container is only lootable once by the player. When they come back to it and open it, it will be empty. Alright, so we'll move on. And we'll go to this one. This guy is Civil Settlement. I have it set up for Polaris. And I wanted it to spawn near the drone base. So over here, I have it right there. Anything that you want spawning near a certain POI, it has to be after that POI in the list. So if I had the drone base below the civil settlement, then I actually have to tell the drone base to spawn near this. Once again, don't stick a drone base anywhere but the top. And you also don't want to have, if you're using the spawn near, high numbers here. Or I also don't recommend using a scaling count. I did here, but it's only 1 to 2. And then right here, we want to set the max distance. So this POI, my civil settlement, will spawn up to 300 meter max from my Polaris Sky T3. And it can spawn as close as 25 meters. And this number is reflecting this number. And since that is a floating POI, it doesn't really matter because this one's not floating. This one can literally be 5 if I wanted it to be. But if it's a bigger POI and you have some small POIs spawning near it, you might want to raise this to say 40 or 50. Alright, I'll go on. This is a alien admin station. I'm using personal container again. But it's no different, really, than a lot of the other POIs. It is avoiding faction territory, as this is a mission-based alien admin POI. I don't want it being near anything else for the players to deal with, so I have it avoiding faction territory. And then a lot of my other POIs actually say, instead of being spawned near, they say don't spawn this POI near. So I don't have to worry about my Raptor run right here being near anything else. It is a pretty cool POI. It's made by Mirror the Killa. It's kind of like a Jurassic Park event happening, and you gotta go in there and prevent all the raptors from spawning. The rest of these POIs are pretty basic after that, and they're set up. My Talon Sky Destroyers, they're part of a mission as well. I have at least a couple on almost every planet, just for the daily mission. They're floating POI, they float over the terrain, and that's pretty much it on those. Alright, drones. So right here, I have my drone base, Polaris Sky T3. My group name, if you notice, right here it says Polaris Sky T3. That has to reflect, this right here, drone base setup name. So your drone base setup name is this, has to match your drone base setup group name. If you're using drone base setup as using the default one, when you type that in, on your POI, it will show up on the bottom of the list all the way down here. If it doesn't, just restart EPD. It should show up. If not, you'll have to type it in. And it works very similar down here with if you're using a planet vessel base, you will also have to type in, use the same concept for group prefab name right here. But if you don't have a planet vessel base, planet vessels will still function without it, and you want to use planet vessel base setup. And for base type, planet vessel base. Of course, I can't choose that here, so I'll have to actually type it in. So I will choose something that doesn't matter. For now, I'll go ahead and choose my drone base so I can easily find it later. Player's got 2-3. Alright, this is the default number for position. Key ID is 0. And I want it to be Polaris in this case. I'm going to go ahead and add my vessel. And it's going to show you all of your POIs, not just the ones you can use as patrol ships. So I'm going to look for my custom Polaris fueler right here. And I'm going to set this one also as Polaris. And its mission is Planet Patrol. And I want it to move kind of fast, but not too fast. 15 is pretty good. Anything above 20 is pretty darn fast on a planet for a patrol ship. 5 would be a nice slow jog. For my respawn delay, if you set 0, no respawn at all. 1/20th of real time. So I want it to spawn pretty quickly. I'm going to say 2. In my initial spawn, I do want this to wait just a hair bit from when I initially have this planet generated on the server. Now for position, this number right here means that this patrol vessel will pretty much patrol the entire planet. I'm going to go ahead and do a radius of about 3,000 meters. And as this planet does have some tall spiky mountains, I'm going to set this a little high at 220. Distance to target. The fueler mainly has sentry turrets on it and a laser turret. So I want it close enough to where all my weapons are going to be in reach of the player. So for this, I'll go ahead and set it at 180. If you notice in the defaults, it's a little bit higher than that. But for this little tiny Polaris fueler ship, that's perfectly fine. Alright, so we'll continue on. Random drone spawning, I take this directly from default. 2500, negative 2500 for my spawn coords. And radius of 3,000 meters, 5 to 10 drones. Alright, right here, spawn zones. This gets confusing for a lot of people. So my main alien POI on this planet is this abandoned mine. And my rule of thumb is I only use this for POIs that are alien. Right here, spawn only if POI is alien. So if the POI is not alien, no matter what you do here, if that is checkmarked, these critters won't spawn. Of course, I've already gone through my the radius in meters and its variant, which means it's kind of like a little bit of change, so it's not a perfect circle. The multiplier of the critters responds and the edge. We're not going to worry about SSG colors at all in this because we're not creating a static or dynamic YAML here. We're creating the finished product. So this does not matter anywhere. And the entities, so I'm just using total horrors, and I have a stockpile of 1,000 of them here. EPD will not let you put -1. -1 is a amount that works as if you were to uncheck a static checkmark box in like while you're trying to create a POI on a spawner. For some reason EPD does not like that number. So I put the stock here pretty high. There is e-groups too you can add, and that is viewed. If you're curious about what the e-groups are actually spawning, you can go into Contents, and we're going to go into Configuration, and we're going to go into e-group config, and we can just go ahead and look at a Ripper Dog Patrol. Oops, that was supposed to happen. Nope, not going to be saving that. Alright, Ripper Dog. Right here, Xerox Crawler Patrol. Wow, I didn't know there was actually Ripper Dogs in that. But yeah, you can go ahead and, and they took the crawlers out. You can look at what these e-groups are actually producing. Alright. This is your regular creature spawning over here. This is where you set up your biomes. And so these 3 biomes right here, my water biomes, are going to be spawning Telluripods. They are the odd creature out because they have the ability to move around in water, unlike the other POIs that do not know what water is. They do need this check marked right here. I have a pretty high number. This number, I'm able to do these higher numbers on my server and have a lot of players in different parts of the planet be able to see a lot more critter spawning because of my playfield options. I have my max amount set at 360 instead of the default 60. So something to think about when you're setting up your amounts on your critters. And I do have Golem Swamp here because I do have one biome, the shallow water, which is my shoreline, that they can spawn in on this biome. Oh, yeah, in that biome. And on my mountains, I got some alien bugs. I think these aren't set very high either. Oh yeah, they are. Yeah, my mountains are swarming with scorpions. Alright, and also with this, you can choose a delay, an amount. On multiplayer servers, I do not see a purpose in there being an initial delay. On a single player scenario, on a starter planet, it makes sense to have a delay. So that way the player can get out there, you know, be able to collect some plants and stuff before all the critters start spawning. Release all the predators. There's not really much of a reason to do that in multiplayer because your initial spawn, like, why does that matter when you have your server up for 6 months? Alright. So that is actually about it for this planet explanation. Of course, I do have it set as a planet. Moon doesn't really matter a whole heck of a lot, but there are some case scenarios where you can use it. Most of my moons actually are registered as planets. And the version. Right here I'm on Alpha 10. Alright, the next one, okay, I'm going to save Kiwayah here. Huh, alright. Only way it's doing this. Normally we'll just save it right where I wanted it to, but scenarios, Transcendence 10. Alright, Playfields, Kiwayah. One playfield I do want to go over is our starter orbit. It isn't really an orbit, by the way, but it's called a haven. And it's a space station. And the sector YAML also, since it says station as its type, you do not want to use the word orbit in its name. I found that out the hard way. I had to get some help from Jaska with HWS, and he got some help from the devs with me on that. But alright, I'm going to open this one up. And it's a space playfield, so this is an orbit. I might as well go over some orbit stuff too. So this is where you set up like the nebula styles and star styles, its description, the playfield type. Since this is in space, it's space. It doesn't have an atmosphere. Its difficulty level is my starter space area, so 2. It's where players initially spawn on the server. It's allowing everything. And it has a little bit of radiation. Space, you probably want to have more. Is orbit playfield, so this one's false because there's no planet in this orbit. This space station actually is in the center. Alright, there's no resources or biomes, but this is where what's important in an orbit or asteroid field or space station. Your fixed POIs. This is where you're going to place your resource asteroids and all of your POIs that are not spawning drones. That'll be important here in a moment. Also, you don't place your patrol ships here either. So this is all of the different asteroids in here. I got some destroyed vessels that players can go explore and multi-tool down. And there's some planning you got to do with this too. You can just go into a default orbit and in game and use DI and start writing down some coordinates. I'll show you what you need here. Right here, this position. So you want to start writing down positions that you want everything to spawn in. Especially with the new asteroid field change, since setting them so much thicker, you might want to go ahead and actually decide, okay, I want my iron asteroid here and all that good stuff. I have somebody that did do a lot of the math for me, and I was able to do a lot that way. And since it is in a circle most of the time, I can just change the negatives to positives and pretty much mirror. This is actually all my coordinates here is the same I think it's 16 total coordinates where I've just mirrored them over with positive negative numbers. Alright, your asteroid fields. I've actually found these are easiest to just copy and paste from, not copy and paste directly, but mimic off of the default orbits. Yeah, this is a asteroid field. And that's really, if you look down here, this is all it needs. You can change the position of it and its rotation. I have not done this on this place because this is just a near empty space with a space station. Now for the most important part. This is my main admin station. Its type is a base admin. For a alien POI, you want it to be BA alien. And my prefab is Haven Station. And right here it's getting that from where I have it in my scenarios. Yeah, I shouldn't say that, but I should get that changed up later. Its mode is survival. Its name is also Haven. That blueprint spawn name that you put in, I recommend just making that the exact same. It is positioned in space. With this one, we actually had a patrol vessel going through 000, even though it wasn't specified that its pathing just put it that way. So we put Haven 1,500 meters negative from that spot, and so far no sign of patrol vessels hitting it. Its faction's admin. There's no difficulty multiplier on this, and or modificator. Initially powered, yes. I got some music added to it. As it's an admin station, it does not need to regenerate. It has a admin core, so players cannot damage it. And if I do want to regenerate it, I'm just going to use my regen commands. But you can add all the same properties here. In space, the ones that really matter is your regen after. You can use a personal container and music. And distance of resource does not matter, especially in space. Alright, this is important over here. I have Haven added, so I hit the add button, and I've added Haven. So mode survival, and my spawn options is structure, and structure to spawn to, also the same path. And I don't really mess with this too much. I mean, you can mess with it if you want to and play around with it. You have easy, medium, hard, and fresh start. And also same thing with the health and the armor they spawn in. This is where you set their starter kit. What's going to spawn inside their backpack. I'm going to get a drink of water real quick. So I pretty much made these all equal. So if I do decide to change the difficulty level that it says you're starting at on the server, then it doesn't really matter. Fresh start, so when the player dies, they choose that fresh start option. This is what they'll get. And it works just like the personal container. You just hit the add button and it gives you the menu to add items. The amount of health and food they start out with, same thing with fresh start. And the armor, you can choose any armor. And that is it for that part. In this sector YAML, by the way, because this is a space playfield, it's a server where you're starting out in space. It's no different, really, than setting a planet up as a start option. So if you notice my sectors that I did in Empyrion Playfield Generator, right here, that is what's specifying that this is a start option. And that is it. And Haven does have a player spawner. It is an item you'll find in the item menu in Creative on it that makes that possible. Drones. Alright. This is not just drones. This is also all of your space vessels. Yeah, that's fun. There we go. Alright. I don't got a lot of them in this playfield because this is the initial playfield. Players start in at level 1. But I have some basic drones. This, just use the defaults for position. There's not really a physical main drone base that exists in space. And I got my freighters. I've set their freighter is the basic default freighter ship you find in the game. On Transcendence, I have all of those set as Polaris. Pretty slow, fixed max speed. What's kind of recommend going over to say 25 or 30. It's missions freighter, and it has a delay between respawn. So after the player's destroyed it, that's how long it takes before it respawns, and how long it is before it self-destructs. It's stock. Anything that has that drone spawner on it is going to have the ability to spawn drones. So you want to program it with stock. The game's default ships do have those spawners. So you can choose between laser and plasma, even though it gives you the whole list. Just choose between these two. The amount and extra, it'll tell you right there what that means. So 0, they're just normal drones. Pathing is very complicated, especially when you have, say, a class 4 planet in your orbit. So this one is pretty simple. So you can literally just go in God mode, go into an empty playfield in space, like an asteroid field, and use DI, just write down coordinates as you go. And that's exactly what this patrol ship will follow. Its initial spawn point and its end. And when it gets to this point, it'll respawn and come back here. And if you're wanting them to circle a planet, I'll actually open up an example of that in a moment. But it's pretty easy. You're actually just using the same set of coordinates, say 10,000, 0, 10,000, and then it's going to go to negative 10,000, 0, 10,000. Actually, we'll go ahead and just add one and do an example of this. So I'm actually going to use one of my custom ones. So I'll use my Palladian Scout. Its faction is going to be Alien. I'm going to make it travel decently fast, so say 17. Its mission's Freighter. And we'll do the same thing. This is a pretty small ship, so I'm going to give them 10 minutes to have to go through that. I'll have it respawn in about 10 minutes too. I've had really bad luck with this. We'll respawn after destruction, so I will get back in the comments about how this functions exactly. And this one doesn't have a drone spawner on it, so I'm not going to worry about stock with it. Pathways. So this one's going to be circling around Haven Station. Well, I put Haven Station at negative 1500. So that's its y coordinate. It's x. Let's say I'm going to put it at 10,000. Oh, if it was a planet, like a class 3 planet, 10,000 would be a good number. You want to go pretty high because it's doing a circle and you're only creating 4 points. Since this is a space station, I'll put it at 2,500. 2,500. Now, this is pretty simple. I'm going to put the same numbers in, except for I'm going to put a negative right there. Same deal. Except for now we're going to go to completely negative. And now we're going to go to a positive and a negative. So you can see it's starting out with a positive, positive. It goes to a negative and a positive. It goes to a negative and a negative. And it goes to a positive and a negative. And if you want to make it do a another circle around, but maybe a closer circle in, we'll go ahead and put it at negative 1500. Right there. Now it's going back to negative, negative. Alright, and that's all it is as far as making patrol vessels travel. Make it a little more visible here. I'm just going to change these over to 0. I'm sure players are going to love me though that I'm going to have a Blade Scout, which is just armed with 1 laser turret, circling around Haven Station. Alright, right there. And that's what it's going to look like. And the more you put these coordinates in, the more it will do a few more trips in a circle around. So I can actually just keep repeating all of these right here. Oh, sorry, yeah, this needs to go to a positive, positive. So it would actually look like this. I'll actually go back to the original. Bingo. That's what it's going to look like to do a circle. Alright. We'll also look at a base. Right here is a stock base POI. It's got some drones. Its mission's immobile. This doesn't matter. I got its faction set. And it has a regeneration property. That is different from the freighters. It works kind of like a base. That's really the only one you want to actually put in the properties on that. You don't want to use the other ones in this position. The Space Patroller. This is a carrier that's mainly just going to sit around and spawn drones. It's going to travel in this amount of a radius away from its initial position, but that's it. That's all it's going to do. They're the easiest thing to set up. They also don't like to regenerate, just FYI. I've actually had to go in and actually add that properties regen after command in Notepad++, and that has sometimes worked. But that is it with the space playfields. Once again, these only produce a playfield.yaml. They do not need a terrain ECF file. Some things I want to go in here. I'm going to go back to Kiwayah. And now that I have Kiwayah open, this is its terrain ACF file that's in that same folder. This is all of its child IDs right here. We were talking about. I have the resources set in numbers 15 through 19. And I got a question too about trying to make the whole planet or a certain biome have a resource in the soil. So say if I want to make silicon here, a resource that's found in when you dig underground. I don't want that to ever be in topsoil, by the way, but you can just go into that underground layer setup, and you would just choose child 15. That is the maximum number you can choose for it. You can't choose anything higher than 15 for a resource that's being used as an underground layer. You do that at your own risk. It will produce some errors in the console. Very rarely, though, a player will get a COQ error, but it does happen. So use at your own risk. But you can change the textures of the planet right here, and you can edit it. This stuff is best seen to know what it is when you're using the TE command in creative mode for a planet, and you actually get to see how these changes are made. I use that as like a reference now, but I do a lot of my editing here because the game, like if I went in and changed Kiwayah's terrain in game in creative mode, it's going to change where it says temperate splat 1 to Kiwayah splat 1. There is no such thing as a Kiwayah splat 1 because it's my own custom planet. So you have to go back in and change this back to the default values. In a single player scenario, that's fine. It can say Kiwayah splat 1. But in a multiplayer server that you want to open to the public, just leave those at whatever any of the default planets use in their terrain ECF, and you will not run into an issue. Alright, I don't need to save it because this is already done. Another thing to go into with EPD is the trader config. We just go into configuration. We're going to open up my trader config. And I actually added a trader. So I got my Haven Dark Market. I have my own custom message. This one doesn't matter. I'm just using TRW food as just a standard. It doesn't do anything in game. There's no discount because he's just a admin trader. Though if you have a custom trader that say you're constantly using for the Polaris or Xerax, then when the player right there, discount when standing with faction is honored. Perfect. You can change this say to 0.15 for a 15% discount when they're honored. Then you just add items, and right here I got my diamonds. They're pretty expensive on the server, but these numbers, it's pretty self-explanatory. How much is being sold for, its range, how much the vendor is going to buy it for, the sell quantity, the second value in sell quantity, and the first value in purchase quantity have to match, or you will get an error in the console. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but if you notice, going into the default values, Elion already has done that exact same thing, so that is required. But EPD has made it very simple to add traders and modify the prices. So I can modify the prices on bandages right here at this trader without having to worry about going into Notepad++, where it's really easy to make a typo and ruin your entire trader config. And of course, the game's not going to tell you the exact line that's messed up. Sometimes it will, most of the time it doesn't. You can also edit your config. Well, actually, I thought about doing that as a separate video anyway, so we'll do that as a separate video. Yeah, feel free to leave me any questions in the comments. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and conclude this. I think we're running pretty long anyway. So thanks for watching.